Hi. It was an ordinary Thursday morning. The kind where nothing is supposed to happen. The kind where the first sip of coffee feels like a small, deserved reward for simply keeping life on track. I'd woken early, as usual. Gym, shower, black coffee. The kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon, her new scented candles, I guessed. A weak attempt at coziness in a house that had felt a little colder, a little emptier, over the past few months. That's when I saw it, a single folded paper, deliberately placed in the center of the kitchen table. Not tossed aside, not casual. A display, meant to be read. I set my mug down, wiped a bit of condensation from the rim. I already knew it was trouble before I touched it. In neat bold letters at the top, backhand index pointing right. Our new relationship standards, non-negotiable. 12 bullet points followed. At first, I thought it was a joke. A poorly chosen Pinterest post, maybe. But as my eyes tracked down the list, any remaining humor drained out of me. Mandatory check-in times for whereabouts. Limitations on social interactions with unapproved friends. Shared financial accounts to be reviewed weekly by her. All large purchases must be pre-approved. Expectations for regular closeness, framed as fulfilling marital duties. Emotional tone monitoring. No raised voices, even in personal defense. Full transparency about personal thoughts and feelings. Failure to share considered a trust violation. No criticism of her empowerment group or their philosophy. Joint attendance required at relationship coaching sessions, frequency at her discretion. No private conversations with mutual female friends without her present. Public presentation of harmonious marriage, regardless of private disagreements. Failure to comply may lead to reevaluation of the relationship dynamic. At the bottom, for our mutual growth and future happiness. Red heart. I sat back, the chair creaking faintly beneath me. There was no signature, but it was her handwriting in the margins, little stars, underlines, and a few passive-aggressive smiley faces near certain, positive, items. For a few long moments, I simply stared at it. At first glance, it might have passed for an earnest attempt at working through marriage problems, the kind of healing language her new circle preached. But this wasn't about healing. This was about control. I read it again, slower this time. Each line dripped with a sickly kind of righteousness. It wasn't a list of requests. It was a leash, disguised as therapy speak. And the worst part? It had been left here for me to find, not discussed. No invitation to dialogue. No opportunity for mutual consent. She wanted me to fall into line, or else. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it back where I'd found it, and drank the rest of my coffee cold. Externally, I would play along. Calm, curious, supportive. Internally, something else had begun to stir. Not just anger, though that would come. Not fear either. No, it was suspicion. Where was this really coming from? And why now? I kept the list in the drawer by the fridge, folded exactly as I'd found it. No need to tip my hand. Not yet, for now, the performance mattered more than the truth. She came down later than usual, her hair done, makeup sharper than her typical weekday face. And the scent, new, expensive. I knew her lineup well. This wasn't from it. A floral amber blend, bold but controlled. Her tone was light, casual. Morning, she said, voice touched with feigned brightness. Morning. I returned without looking up, eyes on the tablet before me. I wasn't really reading emails. I was studying her, the ease in her step, the way she avoided looking toward the table where the list had been left, as if waiting for me to be the first to speak of it. She poured her coffee, then finally asked, all offhand innocence, "Did you happen to see the note I left?" I met her gaze. I did. Pause, watching her watching me. "I think it's important for us," she said, sitting opposite me now. "Just creating more structure, healthy boundaries. So we both know what's expected, you know? Structure, expectations, healthy boundaries. All of it sounded so reasonable, in isolation. Couched in therapy speak, laced with the same patronizing tone I'd heard from her new empowerment friends. I gave her the smallest of nods. "It's worth considering." A flicker of surprise crossed her features. She hadn't expected easy agreement. Good. Let her stay off balance. She brightened a little too quickly. "I'm glad you're open to it." I let her talk a bit longer, about partnership, mutual growth, and her group's latest workshop on radical accountability. I matched her tone with a mild interest, saying little, giving her no reason to probe further. But beneath the surface, something colder had begun to settle. This wasn't about us. Not anymore. I got my first real break later that day. While straightening up the living room, I heard a familiar tone, the ping of a notification. Her tablet, the shared one, buzzed from the end table. She'd left it unlocked. Careless. A quick glance. Calendar entry. Friday. 12:30 p.m. Lunch, M. Location. An upscale bistro we rarely visited anymore. Just. No last name. No context. She didn't mention a lunch date during her morning monologue about alignment. Certainly not one scheduled during a weekday afternoon. And not at that place. A high-end spot designed for quiet, private meetings. Too personal for casual networking. I took my time putting the tablet down, committing the detail to memory. No screenshots. No forensic trail. Just the beginning of a map in my head. For the rest of the afternoon I watched. Subtle things. She spent more time in the bedroom with her phone. Quick, muted calls, the kind where you check the hallway first. Texting bursts, mostly late morning and again at night. Always with the phone angled away. I checked the usual shared accounts. No alerts, nothing obvious. Then the first real thread, a credit card transaction from 2 days ago. Boutique gift store downtown. Nearly $400. No gifts exchanged between us lately, and nothing new in the house. I didn't confront. I archived it. A test then. That evening, after dinner, we sat in the den under the glow of the TV. I kept conversation light, easy, until I steered gently toward Friday. Do you want to grab lunch Friday? Thought I'd take a long break. She blinked, just a beat too long. Oh, I have a thing, she said quickly. Just a networking lunch. With who? Just some people from the group. No mention of. No mention of the specific time or place. Sounds good, I said easily, masking the pulse behind my temples. We'll do lunch another day. I caught it then, the glance down, the moment of calculation in her eyes. The rehearsed ease slipping, just for a second. By midnight, I had moved from suspicion to certainty. This wasn't self-help. It wasn't about repairing trust or rebuilding connection. It was about establishing a narrative. The list wasn't a guide. It was a weapon in progress, a document she could point to, should things turn legal or social. A pre-built storyline, see? He refused to comply. He couldn't meet my needs. He resisted healthy growth. And now there was an someone outside the house. Someone worth lying about. I didn't need a confrontation yet. I needed proof. The rules had changed. The game had begun. By Friday morning, I had a working theory, and a plan. She'd made her first mistake by leaving the calendar entry visible. Her second was assuming I'd react emotionally. I wouldn't. I'd do what I'd always done best: watch, think, move quietly. At breakfast, I kept my performance steady. She dressed with unusual care: soft blouse, tailored pants, heels she hadn't worn in months. The new perfume again. Not overpowering, but layered carefully. Professional enough for deniability, alluring enough for a private meeting. Big day? I asked mildly over my coffee. Just the usual, she replied too casually, grabbing her tote. Lunch with some of the group. I might be back a little late. She was halfway out the door when she added, I'll text if anything changes. Of course she would. I didn't follow her. Too obvious. Too desperate. Instead, I logged into our shared financial accounts and began cross-referencing dates, times, and spending patterns over the past 3 months. It didn't take long to spot the anomalies. 4 separate charges at high-end restaurants, lunches, always weekdays, always solo on her statement. 2 boutique clothing stores, one specializing in higher-end designer pieces she hadn't worn at home. A new fragrance purchase, matching the scent from this week. None of it had come up in conversation. None of it matched the version of our life she presented to friends or family, or to me. Patterns tell stories. You just have to learn the language. I started mapping her text patterns next, not hacking, just observing. She was never fully off-grid before. Now there were clear windows when she went silent. Weekdays, 11:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., longer than any reasonable lunch. Evenings, inconsistent, but bursts of texting around 9 p.m. when she'd retreat to read. Occasional weekend afternoons where she was suddenly helping a friend from the group. I knew her rhythms too well to believe in coincidence. Then came the next thread. A conversation with a mutual acquaintance, an old friend of hers who, unknowingly, still trusted me more than the new crowd did. Casual chat at a weekend gathering. No pressure. Just old friends catching up. Somewhere between stories about work and vacation plans, the friend let it slip. She's been spending a lot of time with that consultant guy from her group lately. You know, the one. Teaches those relationship seminars. Mark, or Mike, or something. Now I had a name. And confirmation. Consultant. Relationship coach. Empowerment group connection. It all fit. This wasn't a peer. This wasn't innocent. They'd met through her news circle. They connected. Beyond coaching. And now she was building a narrative, one where I would either submit to her terms or become the villain in her carefully curated version of events. But I wasn't finished. The next piece came by chance, or by carelessness. 2 days later, a package arrived addressed to her, signature required. I accepted it. Curious, I noted the sender, an upscale men's boutique in the city. She wasn't home. And when I gently pressed along the edges, I could feel the shape, a rectangular box, the size and weight of a premium fragrance set. When she returned later and saw the unopened package on the counter, her reaction was instant, too sharp for casual curiosity. "Oh, that's something for a friend's birthday," she said, sweeping it away without opening it in front of me. Except none of her friends fit the profile for a gift like that. I waited until after midnight to confirm my growing suspicion. She'd left her laptop open in the study, carelessly again. The browser still active. Not emails, smarter than that. But the downloads folder told its own story. A set of documents, recently saved drafts. One titled, Personal Reflection, Relationship Boundaries. Another, Consultation Notes, Divorce Strategy. And the third, Family and Asset Division Planning. I read enough to understand. She wasn't just preparing for separation. She was preparing to frame me, using her relationship standards list as evidence of her attempts to heal the marriage and any resistance as proof of my supposed instability. The list wasn't just leverage. It was a legal tactic in progress. By dawn, the picture was clear. The deception was real. The standards were camouflage. And the battlefield was being prepared. Now it was my turn to prepare, quietly, precisely. No raised voices. No rash accusations. I would gather everything. And when the time came, I would choose when, where, and how to end this game. By the end of that week, I no longer wondered if I was right. I was. The only question now was how deep it ran. First move, map the man. Now that I had a name, Mark, and a connection to her group, I started pulling threads. It didn't take long. Mark wasn't just some fringe self-help coach. He ran a polished operation, glossy website, corporate-sounding testimonials, and a healthy social media following in the conscious masculinity and relationship leadership circles. He marketed himself as a strategic relationship consultant, offering one-on-one coaching for high-achieving women seeking empowered partnerships. A phrase that would have made me laugh if the stakes weren't so high. He also spoke at the same local empowerment group my wife had joined 8 months ago, the group that had slowly consumed her weekends and social life. Workshop photos, tagged social posts, even a podcast interview. Mark was everywhere in their orbit. And now, he was in hers. Patterns emerged fast. 2 weeks earlier, photos from an upscale wine bar, same one linked to one of her unexplained credit card charges. Another tag, a group outing at a private art gallery. She'd said it was a ladies-only event. Mark was in the background of one of the photos, smiling beside her. And it went beyond public events. I cross-referenced another set of transactions, rideshare receipts she'd forgotten to delete from her email account. Multiple late-evening trips to a boutique hotel downtown, the kind known for discretion. All during times she'd claimed to be working on personal growth projects with her group. Then came the most chilling discovery yet. That Sunday, while sorting mail, I intercepted a package, small, plain, marked as fragrance delivery. Curious, I checked the online tracking ID. Boutique men's fragrance, $280, ordered by her account. I didn't touch it further. No need. The next morning, while she was showering, I noticed her handbag slightly ajar on the dresser. Peeking out from an inner pocket, a handwritten card, half-tucked but visible. I didn't remove it, but I read enough. Thank you for helping me remember what real connection feels like. Can't wait for next time. At this point, confrontation wasn't the goal, leverage was. I needed a timeline. I needed corroboration. And I needed to understand the legal angle she was preparing. Which brought me to her laptop again. Late one night, while she took an unusually long phone call on the patio, I accessed her cloud storage. She'd saved draft documents there as well. The worst of them wasn't the evidence of what she'd been hiding. I expected that now. It was this. A legal memo draft from a consultation with an attorney, strategy notes for pre-divorce positioning. The memo outlined key claims, alleging emotional instability on my part, citing her own list, our relationship standards, as proof of her attempts to create a safe, supportive environment, positioning herself as the reasonable party in any custody or asset negotiations. A pre-written statement draft for friends and family, framing me as controlling and resistant to positive change. That was the true betrayal, not what she'd been hiding. By now, that felt almost inevitable. But this? Weaponizing my restraint. Building a legal story designed to paint my calm, methodical nature as manipulative. Prepping her new support system to see her as the victim in a drama of her own making. And then came the business twist. While researching Mark, I discovered a secondary connection I hadn't anticipated. His wife, yes, he was married, sat on the board of a regional philanthropic organization. The same one I'd worked with for years. The same board where I served as a senior consultant. Now the personal threat carried professional risks too. If this scandal broke publicly, my standing in that community could unravel. If Mark's wife found out, and connected me to it, the fallout would spread fast. The stakes weren't just about my marriage anymore. They were about my reputation, my career, my future. I spent that night in my study, lights low, documents spread in front of me. Every email, every financial record, every screenshot, every legal draft. I wasn't ready to move, not yet, but the board was set, the players visible, and when I made my move, it would not be desperate. It would be precise, controlled, final. By this stage, my investigation wasn't about suspicion anymore. It was about constructing an airtight case, and one final thread had to be pulled, her narrative control, the public mask she was building. It surfaced first through an unexpected channel. A longtime mutual friend reached out midweek, the kind of friend who hadn't picked sides, not yet, someone who still believed in giving both of us the benefit of the doubt. We met for lunch, casual enough on the surface, but toward the end, the conversation shifted. The friend leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "Look, I'm hearing some things," they said carefully. "She's been saying you're struggling, that you're not adjusting well to all this change, that you might be unstable." They didn't sound convinced. If anything, there was uncertainty in their tone, concern, not condemnation. I kept my expression even, controlled. "Struggling how?" My friend glanced down briefly, then met my eyes again. "She's told a few people you've been resisting her efforts to make things healthier. That you've been reactive, hard to reason with, controlling." I nodded once, slow. "I see." And I did see, clearly. The list wasn't just internal leverage anymore. She was already preparing her audience, priming our social circle to accept her version of events before any public separation unfolded. Later that night, I found the next piece of proof. Her phone buzzed in the kitchen while she was upstairs. For once, it was unlocked. I didn't need to scroll, just one preview message from her closest new friend. "Remember, you're the one taking the high road. Keep your narrative clear. You tried to make it work. He couldn't handle your growth." A script, plain as day. Then the professional threat deepened. A board meeting approached, one where Mark's wife would be present. Through subtle inquiries, I confirmed the worst. She was beginning to hear rumors. Not about me, not yet, but about her husband. Whispers of an inappropriate connection within the empowerment group. No names attached, yet, if this broke publicly and tangled me by association, the board's trust in me could collapse. And then came the final twist, the one that hardened everything inside me. While cross-checking her cloud documents again, I found a fresh draft, labeled plainly. Positioning statement, legal and social. Inside were talking points. Lines she planned to use not just in court, but with friends, family, and professional contacts. I tried to work with him, but he became defensive and erratic. The standards were for both of us, but he refused accountability. His behavior became unpredictable. I had to protect myself, and the worst, he was emotionally controlling. Here's the list I gave him to show how hard I tried. The list. Not a conversation starter. Not a healing tool. A weaponized exhibit, intended for court, for public view, for social proof. And behind it all, the connection she was hiding. The man she'd chosen, one whose wife now sat close to my professional world. If this exploded wrong, I'd lose far more than a marriage. I'd lose clients, board positions, public trust, and she would frame it as my fault, all under the guise of growth. But she had overplayed her hand. I wasn't reacting. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't spiraling. I was documenting every message, every draft, every transaction, and I was almost ready. Almost. The day I chose for the confrontation was unremarkable on the surface. No anniversary, no birthday, just a Wednesday. Predictability was my ally. Surprise was hers. I spent the morning in my office, reviewing everything: financial statements, screenshots, legal draft copies, message transcripts. I wasn't preparing to argue. I was preparing to present. By the time I set the final folder down, the outcome was no longer in question. There was no version of this where we walked away reconciled. No repair. Only resolution. She returned home just after 6. The same bright facade, the same too casual smile. A lightness in her step that would have fooled anyone who hadn't read her draft statements. "Long day?" I asked evenly, rising to greet her. She set her bag down. "You know how it is, meetings, errands, a lot going on with the group right now." I nodded. "I'm sure." I let her settle in, glass of wine, phone on the counter, her guard beginning to lower. Then I moved. I retrieved the folded list from the drawer, placed it in the center of the kitchen table. Beside it, a blank sheet of paper and a pen. When I sat down, my voice was calm. "We need to talk." Something in my tone must have cut through the usual routine. Her smile faltered. She approached cautiously, taking the seat across from me. I wrote one word at the top of the blank page, in clean, deliberate strokes. "Divorce." Her eyes widened slightly. "What?" I held up a hand. Not harsh. Controlled. "No scenes," I said quietly. "You'll want to hear this fully." Then I began. First, the financial records, laid out plainly. Restaurant charges, boutique gifts, hotel transactions. I didn't narrate. I let the evidence speak. Next, the evidence, photos, messages, proof of her connection to Mark. Her face tightened, the color draining from her cheeks. Still, I continued. The package, the fragrance she'd gifted him, the handwritten card, then the rideshare receipts, the calendar entries, the cross-reference timelines. She broke the silence first, voice thin, defensive. "You're twisting this. You've been spying, controlling." I laid down the final piece, her legal drafts, screenshots of the positioning statement, notes from her pre-divorce consultation. The words she had written, now read aloud, her own language echoing back at her in the center of our kitchen. For a moment she froze. Then denial cracked. Anger came first. She straightened in her chair, voice sharp and rising. "You invaded my privacy. You had no right." I didn't move, didn't flinch. Remaining seated, my tone stayed measured. "You left these trails," I said quietly. "I followed them. That's all." A beat passed. Her eyes darted to the documents between us, then back to me. The anger faltered, twisted, and the pivot began. Her voice broke slightly, softening, desperate now. "I was trying to protect myself. You don't understand what I've been through." I still didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. I simply held her gaze steady and cold. "I understand exactly what you've been trying to do," I said. "You crafted a public narrative to cover what you've been hiding. You prepared legal documents to frame me. And you used this list." I tapped the folded paper in front of us, deliberate, "as your future exhibit." Her voice broke. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not doing anything," I replied. "You already did." The power shift was complete. No shouting. No chaos. Just the clear collapse of her constructed reality. She sat frozen, breath shallow, eyes darting. The practiced composure gone. I stood then. Calm. Final. "I won't live under rules written to break me," I said. "This game is over." I left the table, the list and the evidence neatly in place. By the time I reached my office, the sound of her quiet sobbing began to echo down the hall. I filed first. Before dawn the next morning, my attorney had the documents drafted and in motion: divorce, asset protection, immediate freezing of joint financial accounts. Surprise was my shield. Her preparations hadn't accounted for a rapid, proactive move. She had expected me to flail, to defend, to lose composure. Instead, I struck first, methodically, legally, in absolute silence. The fallout began within days. Word spread quickly through the board I served on, not because I leaked it, but because Mark's wife did. The rumors, once whispered, broke wide open. I learned later that she'd found her own proof: messages, financial discrepancies, a pattern of lies. She confronted Mark publicly, at a charity event no less. Within hours, key members of the professional circle we all shared were aware of the scandal. And with that, Mark's carefully curated image collapsed, and hers began to unravel with it. The timing worked in my favor. Before she could activate her prepared positioning statement, the truth was already moving faster than her narrative. Several of her empowerment group friends distanced themselves almost overnight, not out of morality, but out of self-preservation. The association with a now public scandal was too risky for their image-conscious circles. More than one mutual acquaintance reached out to me quietly. We had no idea it had gone this far. She wasn't telling us the whole story. You've handled this with more dignity than I could have. The legal angle turned fast as well. Her drafts, her weaponized list, became Exhibit A in my counterfilings. Documented proof of manipulation. Evidence of a constructed narrative. Demonstration of bad faith preparation. Her attorney, when confronted with the full stack my team presented, quickly shifted tone, from aggressive posturing to quiet negotiation. Suddenly, her legal standing was weakened. Suddenly, her claims of emotional instability rang hollow. And the final twist? Mark turned on her. As his professional world burned, he cut ties swiftly, telling colleagues and, eventually, mutual acquaintances that things were taken out of context, that boundaries were misunderstood. In private, he distanced himself entirely, to protect what remained of his reputation. The man she'd risked everything for? Gone. Isolated. Silent. By the time our first legal hearing approached, her world looked very different. The empowerment circle that had emboldened her? Fragmented. The public image she'd worked so hard to curate? Cracked and transparent. Her so-called new relationship standards, now clear evidence of manipulation, used not to heal, but to control, and ultimately to destroy. Thank you for watching. Bye.